Chiefs Kingdom. Happy 4th of July. I hope you were all out there celebrating your independence safely and you come back with the same amount of fingers as you did before. So, everyone, I hope you're having a great 4th of July. I'm Gary McKenzie, your ever so gracious host for Gridiron Lines, a little show here on RGR Football Network, the best place to get Chiefs YouTube content in the history of the existence of humanity. Not necessarily talking about my little channel. I'm talking about Ryan and Dan and Seth, particularly Ryan and Dan. I stand on the shoulders of giants. They're both really good at what they do. And I just play my little role here. And my little role today is going to be talking about training camp. So right now we're in the dead spell of the NFL season, the worst time of the year for Chiefs content creators and people who are obsessed with football, like myself and like you watching this video. But I want to talk about training camp, kind of more nuts and bolts than maybe I usually do. But training camp kicks off July 21st. So they'll practice typically at 9:15 in the morning, and then they usually go to right a little bit before noon. So almost 3-hour long practices. And we'll talk a little bit about Andy Reid's training camps, what makes them so difficult compared to other NFL training camps. But basically, camp kicks off July 21st, and it ends on August 15th. The first preseason game is August 10th. So, a month and 6 days from now, if you're watching this on the 4th of July, the Chiefs will have their first preseason game, and then they'll start working on roster cut downs and move to their second preseason game, and then lastly, their third preseason game. But the Chiefs only have 5 practices after their first preseason game. So they're building up for this first preseason game, then they have their practice run, and actually I misspoke, it's 4 practices after the first preseason game. So training camp goes from July 21st to August 15th. In total, it looks like there's about, 20, 25 practices or so. That's just me eyeballing it. So there's a lot of preparation that has to go into the Chiefs, team during training camp. And without a ton of practices, they have to really make good use of their time in training camp. So if you wanted to go and look at the Chiefs in person and see how they do maximizing their time in training camp, you could do so. In fact, there's several days where you can get a $5 admission to go watch the Chiefs training camp. And these days will be sprinkled all throughout the Chiefs training camp schedule. So if you're curious about wanting to see, what's going on in camp, I highly recommend it. I remember going to training camp and whenever Patrick Mahomes was first kind of coming into the scene, and watching him in training camp and be like, oh my gosh, this guy is awesome. And so it's a good place to get a first look at players that you might not have, otherwise been able to see in person. I saw Isaiah Pacheco whenever he first came up into the NFL, his rookie season in training camp. I took a couple looks at him and I was like, yeah, this guy's legit. I saw him catching the ball. He had smooth hands, fluid movement. He just looked like a talented NFL player. And so you can go out there in training camp and see these things in person. And it's a wonderful thing that the Chiefs open these up to the public because it gives us Chiefs-obsessed people to go and have this opportunity to see these players. You come up and look the part and get excited about some of these players and say, hey, this player legitimately has a shot to be really good. And so over the years, the Chiefs have had many players like this show up in training camp. Some of them panned out, some of them didn't. But it's always this exciting time of the year where you get to get a first look at how these players look in pads, and a lot can be said about that difference, that jump the player makes whenever they're, just in the shorts and shirts to when they put pads on. And if they're popping, on tape, if they're popping in training camp, then there's a good chance they'll make the roster and then be a contributor for this Chiefs team. So I'm excited to see how the Chiefs draft picks pan out, particularly Kingsley Suamataia. I want to see how well he does. I'm curious to see how Xavier Worthy does once he puts the pads on. So it should be an exciting training camp for everyone. But nuts and bolts, training camp starts Sunday, July 21st. It ends on Thursday, August 15th. Typically, they'll practice at 9:15 in the morning. There's a couple times where they practice at 8:15 or 10:15, but usually it's 9:15. So if you want to get up to St. Joe and watch the Chiefs training camp, more power to you. But what is it about the Chiefs training camp that is so difficult? So you hear players talk about, Andy Reid runs this really challenging training camp. It's really hard. It's brutal. What makes it so hard? So I have some quotes from players ranging through Andy Reid's tenure. And I want to start with Eric Fisher in 2018. So Eric Fisher said, Coach Reid runs a tight ship in training camp. It's all about discipline and pushing yourself beyond your limits. That's how champions are made. So that's Eric Fisher in 2018 before the Chiefs even won a Super Bowl with Andy Reid at the head coaching position. Tyrann Mathieu in 2020, he says, Andy Reid's camps are no joke. He challenges you mentally and physically every day. It's tough, but it builds character and resilience. Tyreek Hill in 2021, Coach Reid doesn't take it easy on us in camp. He wants us to be the best, and that means pushing us to our breaking point and then pushing some more. Frank Clark in 2022 said, training camp with Coach Reid is intense. He demands perfection and won't settle for anything less. It's where we forge our identity as a team. And then Travis Kelce in 2023, Andy Reid's training camps are like a boot camp for football. It's grueling, it's demanding, but it's where we come together as a team and prepare for greatness. And then lastly, Patrick Mahomes in 2020, Coach Reid expects a lot from us in camp. He's all about preparation and pushing us to be better every day. It's intense, but it pays off. So what is it that has all these Chiefs players saying, this is intense, this is hard, this is a difficult training camp? There are several factors that go to that. The first factor I want to say is something that Andy Reid does that very few NFL coaches do, is he has live tackling during training camp. So if they're playing a scrimmage, he will have live tackling. You do not see very many coaches, especially these new age younger coaches, having players doing live tackling during a scrimmage in training camp. You just don't see it. And I think Andy Reid is actually on the right side of the fence about this. Some players, they don't want to tackle. They're worried about getting injured. But if you look at the Chiefs team over the past several years, knock on wood, they have not had a ton of injuries. And I'm a big believer that if you want to be good at something, you have to practice it. If you want to be good at tackling, you have to practice it. If you go into the regular season without practicing tackling, you're going to be rough. You're going to be rough around the edges. And in addition to that, there's a certain thing about, hitting someone and having that contact and kind of getting your calluses built up in a way that makes it so that if you've had that kind of ramping up in training camp where you're getting this physical contact, then it sets you in a better place or a better position not to get hurt during the regular season. So I think tackling and having that kind of controlled environment, controlled chaos that Andy Reid has during training camp, where he allows tackling, live tackling in drills, that helps the Chiefs stay healthier. That helps the players stay healthier because they've built up those muscles, those tackling muscles, the physical response to tackling, all the different things that go on whenever you are threatened to be tackling, like changing direction, boosting your speed, testing all of these soft tissues that you have. So I think this is something that players think is rough and challenging in camp for the players, but at the end of the day, it's better for them. So that's one thing about Andy Reid's camp that makes all these players say, hey, yeah, this is difficult, this is challenging. Another thing that Andy Reid does is he tries to maximize every single second of practice. He wants players to be running reps relentlessly. If he's got 3 hours for practices, he wants to get as many reps as possible. And so that's something that Tyreek Hill was saying, it's so challenging, it's demanding, and that's because he was constantly being asked to run routes, get reps in during practice. There's very little break. Players are constantly moving, and this is challenging. Your conditioning has to be at a good state. If you remember, Rashee Rice came from SMU rookie year, and he threw up on his first day of training camp. I don't know about if any of you have ever been pushed too hard in a practice. For me, back in the day, it was basketball. I never threw up, but there were times where I was thinking, yeah, I mean, this is not looking good. So if you've ever gotten sick while you've been doing physical conditioning, you know how terrible of a place that is to be in. And Rashee Rice was a college athlete at the highest level, and now he's going in the NFL. And this was not a player that was out of shape by any means, and this training camp pushed him to the brink of throwing up. So he's gonna make you run, and he's gonna get the max out of you, get the most reps. And why does he want the most reps? Because Andy Reid's playbook is complex. So back to Rashee Rice getting sick. Wide receivers are asked to do so much in Andy Reid's system. He wants them to know every single position, wants them to be able to be interchangeable. Same goes for the offensive line. He wants his offensive line to be able to be interchangeable and know every single position. And because of that, you got to get reps in. And because of that complexity, you need to get practice doing many different things. So it's challenging in the fact that you have to run so much, do so many reps, but it's also challenging in that you have to learn so many different positions, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. Spagnuolo is a little different. Like, he does like his secondary to be very flexible, be able to do different coverages, be able to fill in different roles. So if you want to have a cornerback fill into a safety role because you're maybe showing some weird blitz or some weird look or unusual look, and then safeties maybe filling in that slot role. So Spagnuolo does it too, just not quite to the level that Andy Reid does it. So the complexity, the mental challenge that Andy Reid puts on his players is another reason why it makes it so difficult for players and why it's so grueling for the players. And then in addition to that, Andy Reid has just an unbelievably meticulous attention to detail. So he is a firm believer that the devil's in the details, and he's going to prepare his players for every single possible thing that he can during this month and 6 day time frame they have, or month and a couple week time frame they have for training camp. And then he'll also prepare players for adversity. So think about the Super Bowl. The Chiefs were prepared for the overtime rules. Every single player on the Chiefs team knew, hey, like, this is what we're going to do in overtime, and this is our strategy. The 49ers, on the other hand, many of their players didn't even know the rules in overtime. So Andy Reid's attention to detail and preparation for these unusual situations is on full force in training camp. He's preparing them for every single outcome. He wants them to know what to do in a given situation. And so all these little pieces of this puzzle are what makes training camp so darn difficult and challenging for Chiefs players and any player that comes to Kansas City. And, if there's a free agent that signs for Kansas City and there's another player that's a friend with this free agent that just got signed, that player will tell the player that's going to the Chiefs, hey, get ready for training camp. That's all I got to say. Show up prepared. Don't show up out of shape. Show up in shape. Show up physically ready. Show up mentally ready, because he is going to put you through the grinder. And I think this is why the Chiefs over the years have had such a good start to their season. I wonder how other teams are preparing and getting a good start to their season, like the Bengals, and how they've had a rough start to their year almost every year that Joe Burrow's been their quarterback. You don't see Andy Reid and the Chiefs doing that. So that's because they prepare so much and they push themselves to a limit in training camp. So those are the handful of things, quotes from players, that make this that kind of show why it's so difficult for Chiefs players during training camp, why Andy Reid makes it so difficult. In addition to that, not only are they dealing with all these mental challenges, physical challenges, there's also the heat. So they are practicing at 9:15 in the morning to around noon, sometimes earlier depending on weather. But it's hot out there. I mean, if you go to one of these training camp practices, be ready to sweat. I mean, it's going to be hot, and that's another battle of the elements. And you've seen the Chiefs go and travel to places like Jacksonville, Miami, different warm temperature places at the beginning of the season, and sometimes it's 95, 100 degrees in these games, and they're still able to perform at a high level. And that's because they've also been tested in the heat and the conditions. So it's going to be a grueling training camp for the Chiefs. I'm excited to see which players can come up out of, the pool and look to be real contributors for the Chiefs team this season. It's an exciting time of the year. I love training camp. And if I go to training camp, I'll let you know. So maybe some of you can come and say hi to me if you even want to do that. I don't even know. But let me know down in the comments if you plan on going to training camp and memories you have from past Chiefs training camps. I'm looking to maybe do kind of like a retrospective on memories from training camp. Maybe talk about the Boomer Grigsbys or the Bobby Scipios out there that we remember as having great training camps, and then maybe not so much. So let me know down in the comments if you have any favorite camp players or camp moments just from your experience, maybe visiting camp or reading up on the Chiefs during training camp. Let me know down in the comments because I'm curious, and if I have enough comments, enough content there, I'll make a video based on those comments and kind of go over my thoughts on each. But this is Gary signing out. I hope you all have a good, safe, and happy 4th of July. If you're watching this on the 4th, if you watched it after the 4th, I hope you had a good 4th of July. But this is Gary signing out. Y'all take care. Go Chiefs.
Thanks for watching this video from the team at RGR Football. Click these videos to see more and subscribe to RGR Football.